Hey everybody, and welcome to the first tutorial of the series in which we're going to still create React app. Now, to make things a little bit more manageable, I split this one into 4 different parts. The first part, which is this one, we're going to build the development configurations for Webpack. In the second part, we're going to do the production configs. In the third one, we're going to write the service worker, because applications bootstrapped with Create React App come with an offline first service worker, which is very easy to use. So we're going to need to steal that part as well. And finally, we're going to take all this code, bundle it together into a CLI so that we can bootstrap our own React projects with just one single line of code. Now, this being said, I think it's time to jump into the code and start stealing, right? So here I have a project generated with the original Create React App package with a few modifications. First of all, I deleted the node modules folder, and secondly, I modified the package.json so that we have all the required packages for the entire project. Now, I don't want you to waste time writing the package names by hand, so I put the package.json below this video. Just copy paste it, put it into this folder, and then run npm install. All right. Now, while this is going on in the background, you might notice here another file, benchmark md, and this is basically a file with some stats, or maybe some checkpoints if you want to, bullet points would be more accurate. Basically, I want to make sure I steal things the right way. So I took a look on the Create React App outcome, the development one, and the production one, and I wrote here some things of interest. So, first of all this JavaScript, CSS, and media resources are served from a static folder, each of them in its own separate subfolder. Now, the app, as I said, contains an offline first service worker. We're going to talk more about this in the third video. We have source maps for JavaScript, both in development and in production build. And the CSS is auto-prefixed for older browsers, right? So maybe we're using some newer CSS features which need vendor prefixes for older browsers. Create React App does this for us. Now, on the more specific side, on the production build, we're generating a build folder with everything we need. The resource names are hashed to allow long-term caching. The resulting HTML is minified, as you might have guessed, and so is the CSS. So let me just change this one here. We also have source maps for CSS, and finally, everything in the public folder. So if you run npm run build in a Create React App project, you're going to see that everything inside this public folder is going to be copied in the resulting build folder. So we want to do that as well. Now, finally, in the sizes category, and I think this one is especially important because, yeah, we want the names and the paths and the way things are imported to work the same, but we also care from a performance standpoint about sizes, right? So Create React App produces 2 JavaScript files actually here, which in total have 131 kilobytes, one CSS, which has 1.1 kilobyte, and the minified HTML, which is 2.2 kilobytes, right? So our goal is to check all those bullet points in this page, but with a special attention to the sizes, right? We're not going to be able to get them exactly like those, but if there's just a few kilobyte difference, then I think we're okay. We've stolen the package, correctly, and we should be all good. So I'm going to keep an eye on this file during the development. And this being said, let's jump right in and create and start with the Webpack configs. And first, let's create a Webpack config.js file in the root of our project, right? By default, Webpack is going to get its configurations from a file called like this, found in the root. So that's why we made this file here. And we need to export either an object, a configuration object, or a function. And because we have two different builds, in this one I want to export the function which returns the object so that we can customize the function. You know, depending on the build type that we want to make, we're going to return different configs. Now, I'm gonna leave this empty for now, just so I give you the bigger picture of how we're going to structure our Webpack. So we have here the Webpack config, and this one is going to have just the common configurations between the development and the production build. Then we're going to have two more separate files, webpack.development.js and the webpack.production.js. They're going to have the specific configurations for that build. And the way it's going to work in the end is, depending on the build, we're going to merge the common config with the specific one and thus produce the final outcome. I found this technique in a tutorial on Frontend Masters about Webpack. I'm gonna put a link below. I really recommend watching it. It's really nice. Cool. So this being said, let's create here the folders, and I like to create a build utils folder, and here I'm going to put webpack.development.js, and as I said, webpack.production.js. Cool. We're gonna leave them empty for now. I'm gonna get back to them. We're gonna get back to them pretty soon. So now, regarding the config instructions in the main config file, as I said before, we just want to put here the common ones, you know, what doesn't change between the builds. And what doesn't change at first is, well, the entry point, right? Which is in source index.js. So this is our main entry point of the application. Now, if we look in this index.js here, let me open it. You see we have a bunch of imports, and we're importing some node modules. We're importing some CSS, which if you've never seen this before, it might be a little bit, you know, like weird. We're importing other JavaScript files, and yeah. And if we look in this one, app.js file, you can see the same. We're importing node modules. We're importing an SVG this time, and also some CSS. So Webpack allows us to import pretty much any type of file from a JavaScript file, right? You've seen we can import CSS, we can import SVGs, JavaScript, whatever. So it allows us to import pretty much what we want, but we gotta configure it in such a way so it knows how to handle these files. You know, it doesn't know how to handle them by default. And this is where loaders come in. So we're going to specify some rules. And a rule is pretty much kind of like this. Hey Webpack, when you find an import to a file which matches this regex, then process it in this way. And that's pretty much it. So the first rule is going to be this. If you find a file with the extension which ends in .js, use, and for this one we're going to use the bubble loader. Okay? So it's going to use the bubble loader, and it's going to transform that JavaScript file depending on how we configure it, which we didn't do, but we're going to do now. So let's create a .bubblerc file in root, and here we're going to have presets, and we're going to use two presets. The first one is so that it understands React, and the second one is that it transforms the code so it's compatible with older browsers. Okay, so this one, it knows how to handle JSX and transforms JSX to, you know, valid JavaScript, and this one transforms that valid JavaScript to, you know, another valid JavaScript which is supported by maybe some older browsers. And this browser list is already written by us by Create React App. If we go into package.json, you can see here, you know, the defaults of Create React App. For the production, we care about these browsers. For development, for these browsers. Okay, so bubblerc is going to handle this for us, and in this way we're going to be able to import JavaScript files. Now, The other type of import is CSS files, but I want to configure them differently based on the build. So I'm not going to put it here. I'm going to put a separate configuration in development and a separate one in production. But what's common though is the third type of file we import, and that's, like medias, images, like let's say media assets, for example. So I'm going to put here, if it finds an import which ends in maybe, PNG, SVG, which is our case, maybe JPEG, and I put here the question mark just in case the E is missing, maybe WebP, which is a newer image format, GIF, and you can just write your own regex here. So when it finds a file like this, I want it to use file loader. So using the file loader, it's going to know how to handle these types of, media files, which are like, it's not code, it's actual, images or maybe some PDFs or something like that. Now, a small remark here, if we go back to the benchmark, we can see here all resource names are hashed. This is in the production build. Now, this also applies to that SVG we've seen imported. And to be honest, I don't want to write two separate configurations, one for development and one for production when it comes to these types of files. So I'm going to change this one and hash the file name no matter the configuration. So we're going to put loader, file loader, and here we have options, and I think it's called name, I'm not exactly sure. So it's going to generate our files in static media. Okay, remember all our resources are going to be in a static folder with 3 separate subfolders. And then I'm going to put name dot, and here we're going to put the hash, content hash of 8.ext. So depending on a file name, depending on the extension, because we have multiple extensions here, it's going to generate them in a static media, and it's going to take the name, it's going to append a hash based on the content, and then it's going to append the extension. Cool. So moving on from loaders, so again, these are loaders. We also have plugins in Webpack, and just a short, quick crash course in case you don't know the difference between them. Well, a loader is basically like a function which takes some code, as a string, right? So a string of code, and returns another string of code. Our bubble loader, for example, takes some string which contains JSX and then returns another JavaScript code without JSX, which is valid to run in the browser. Now, plugins can do much more, can do many things other than this, right? They have much more power. So if we need some features, if we need our configuration to work in a certain way, not just how to transform code, we're going to need to use a plugin. And the use case of the first plugin here is this one. Well, yeah, we're going to generate some files, some JavaScript files, some media assets. All right, but if we look in our index.html, which is in public, yeah, there are no links here, right? There's no script tag, there's no link tag to a CSS. Those assets are not linked to our index.html. So we're going to use the HTML Webpack plugin to basically insert them in the HTML file after the Webpack is done. Let's import it first. All right, and here the options are as follows. We're going to use the template, which is going to be in public index.html. Now we want to minify it. I don't care if I minify it in development and production as well. Probably I'm not going to debug the HTML. So let's just minify it in both cases. And here's a small parenthesis. In the documentations, they say that if you put here minify true, it should do all the minifications. For some reason, it didn't really work for me. So I'm just going to put 2 of them by hand. This one is remove comments true, and collapse white spaces true. And this will output, you know, one HTML file, that one with the script inserted in it, with the CSS in it, and all minified in one line. Right. And now for the final option of this HTML Webpack plugin, we're going to need to take a more in-depth look at index.html. So you may see this kind of like variable here, you know, in a couple of places. And you see, this is used when we have links to some static assets which don't change, which don't pass through Webpack at all. So they're not imported from our React code. They are just like there from the beginning. And this is the favicon, some logos, the manifest JSON, so that it's a progressive web app and so on. And create React app gives us a lot of power. It doesn't fill in the entire URL. Instead, it just puts the name at the end, as you see here, favicon.ico. And this part leaves it as a variable in case we're going to deploy our site, you know, in case we're going to host these resources in a different place than we deploy our application. Then we change the value of public URL and all the links change. We don't have to manually go and change each one of them. So we're going to need to tell HTML Webpack plugin what's the value of this public URL variable. And let's go here. And in this case, let's just say we're going to deploy everything in the same place. So template parameters, public URL, empty string. And yet, this is still not going to work because by default HTML Webpack plugin doesn't understand this kind of syntax for parameters. However, it understands this one. So yeah, just go ahead and change it in this way so that Webpack HTML plugin understands it, and then it will replace it with the empty string which we configured here. Right. All right, so this should be pretty much it with the common configurations between the two types of builds. So let's jump into the development one. And here we're going to export. Again, we can export a function which returns an object or an object, but we don't need this one to be dynamic. So let's export an object. And here, let's start with the mode property, development. Right, this tells Webpack how to build. We tell it this is a development build. Then the output, and this is the JavaScript output. We want to create a file, and again, thinking of the benchmark, we need it to be in static JavaScript. And for development, I just want to call it bundle.js. I don't really care. It's fine by me. We're going to have one bundle called bundle.js. That's it. Now, when it comes to the rules, I left CSS out of the previous config, so let's put it here. So when we're importing CSS files, we want to use what? And here is where things, here is where we're going to use two loaders. Actually, we're going to use three loaders instead of one. So first one, we're going to use CSS loader, so that it understands the import of CSS files. Then comes the question, okay, how are we going to tie the CSS code with the HTML? Because we can tie it in pretty much three different ways, right? We can use the link tag, as you know. We can use the style tag and just write the CSS inline. Or if we want to apply the CSS on the elements themselves, we're going to use the style attribute. So it's pretty much the three ways we have, the three methods we have of linking CSS with HTML. And in terms of create React app and the development build, it uses the second one. So it adds dynamically after the JavaScript runs a style element in head with all our CSS. So in order to do this, as I said, we're first going to use CSS loader so it understands the import of CSS, and then, and this might be a little bit weird because I say and then but go before the loader, we're going to use style loader. The order of plugin of loaders is reversed. So this is why it first uses this one and then goes back and uses this one, right? So when it comes to loaders, it goes from last to first in this order, and it keeps passing the output. You know, I said loaders are basically taking some code and returning some other code. They're basically taking code from, they're basically passing some code to the first loader, it returns some code, then it passes it to the second loader, and so on and so on. And actually, we need another one, and that is, we want to auto prefix our CSS, right? And in order to do this, we're going to use another loader, and this one we need to configure it a little bit. So this is going to be the first one. We're going to configure it a little bit. So instead of a string, we're going to use an object, post CSS loader, and here I think the config is options, plugins, new auto prefixer, and let's import this one. And remove the comment, right? So it's gonna first take the code, pass it through post CSS loader, auto prefix it, then CSS loader, then style loader, insert it into head, and voila, our application is gonna be styled. And finally, so I think this kind of wraps it up with the types of files we're going to import. Finally, we need the development server. So yeah, we need a server to actually serve our assets, and Webpack has a Webpack dev server package, and we're going to configure it here, and we're going to say dev server. And because we're building a single page app, and we want, if somebody's hitting a route which doesn't contain like a static asset, I want it to return the index.html, right? All the routing is done on the front end, so like the back end, the server always will return index.html, the same one. So this, we tell it to do this by history API fallback true. And then what we want is the content that's not generated through Webpack, and this is the content in public, right? We want to tell him like, hey, hey server, you're gonna have some files that pass through Webpack, the JavaScript, the CSS, the logo.svg, but I also have some files which don't pass through Webpack, those. But I'm gonna, link to them. I want to show the favicon in the tab. So I gotta tell him where those files are found. And for this, we're going to go content base, and here I think we're going to need to use the path plugin, not plugin, sorry, module, which is built into Node.js. So path.resolve dir name public. Cool. So we're pretty much done with the development config and done with the common configs between both types of builds. The only thing that's left is to link them together, right? We got to tell him somehow that, hey, take this one, merge it with this one, and the result is going to be the final config. And for this, we're going to use a package called Webpack merge. And this is the reason why we're using a function here, because we want to return a call to Webpack merge, and this is going to take 2 or more objects as parameters, and it's going to deep merge them, right? It's smart enough to merge the configs deeply and then produce one single final config. So we're going to give him the common config first. In case we have some overrides, we want the development config to take precedent. And then for the second object, we got to require it. Build utils Webpack development. Right? So when we're going to run the Webpack development config, is going to merge the common one found in this object right here with the object found in this file. We're going to merge them, create one final config, and voila. So how do we run it? Well, let's go into package.json, and here we have the scripts property, which is an empty object right now, and let's add a new script called start, which is going to be Webpack dev server, and I'm going to add the option hot from hot reload. If you've never used it before, this option is an optimization one. Basically, if while we're developing, we're saving files, the Webpack is rebuilding itself because we're in development mode, but we don't want it to rebuild the entire app. If you're having a pretty big project, that process might take like tens of seconds, so it's not something you want to do every time you save a project. And with the hot options, Webpack is smart enough to know just what part of the code changed, just rebuild that part like a subtree, and then automatically swap it, live. And this leads to an increased performance because you don't have to rebuild everything from scratch. So we got the Webpack dev server, we have the hot option, we have the merge between the original config and the development one found here. So yeah, I think this should pretty much be it. Let's test it. So npm start, and let's see if it works. And it didn't work because it can't resolve source index.js. We gotta give him a relative path here. And let's close it, npm start. What happened? Cannot find module preset React in bub.lrc. Typo, preset React. Close it. Start again. Yeah, and it says compiled successfully, but let's see if it works. So let's start up Chrome, localhost 8080, that's the port. And we have the React app. We have the the logo which moves. We have here in the tab the favicon, so let's refresh the page. There's no request that fails, so it's a good sign. Everything is okay. If we look in the network tab, and let's go to all, we can see the path for the bundle, static.js bundle.js. The logo, this one, this one is important. You see the SVG logo, which is this one spinning here, has the hash and is found where? Localhost static media and logo, so this is good. What else do we need? Let me look at the benchmark. So static folder, the service worker we're gonna do in the third tutorial, source maps for JS. So let's see if I can maybe app.js. Oh yeah, I didn't put the source maps. Good. Since we want source maps for both environments, I'm gonna put it in the common config here, and it's gonna go dev tool source map. Let's rebuild it again. And let's see now if we search for app.js. We see the file, so source maps are working. We can debug it like so. This is good. So going back to benchmark, source maps, CSS, is it auto prefixed? Well, let's see if first of all is inserted into head here. And yeah, we have a style. Oh yeah, and you can see the prefixes right here, WebKit box orient, WebKit box direction, and so on. These are not found in the original CSS, so the auto prefixer worked, which is great. And yeah, this pretty much wraps it, the first tutorial. We have the development build working. We can, let's see if we refresh it. Let's see if it refreshes. So app.js, and let's change some text here. Edit now and fire emoji. Save. and it should refresh on the, yeah, you see, it's changed here. So yeah, we ticked all the checkpoints for the development build, which means we've stolen this part correctly. I'm gonna close this video right now, so it's still short enough to be easily digestible, let's say. And I'll see you in the next one, where we're gonna continue on the code we have, so don't delete it. And we're going to write the production build and integrate everything together, meaning we're going to have separate commands for development and production. This is what I wanted to say. The integration is actually going to be in the third video, where we're going to, I mean, not the integration, the wrapping up is going to be the third video, where we're going to have the service worker as well. So yeah, I'm going to stop this one now. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one with the production config. Cheers.